Imagine waking up one morning and finding out that your own land, your family's legacy, has just been stolen. All for someone else's luxury. Nathan Blake stood at the edge of his wild, untamed garden, his fingers clenched around a crisp white envelope. His chest tightened as he read the words over and over again. Violation notice, $2,000 fine, unauthorized land use, mandatory forfeiture for HOA redevelopment. Nathan's jaw tensed. He had lived in Silver Summit for years. Not in one of the glass-walled, ultra-modern mansions that dotted the hillside, but in a modest, weathered home that had been in his family for generations. The land behind his house, it wasn't just dirt and weeds, it was a sanctuary, a place where his father once walked barefoot, telling stories of their ancestors, a place where he could breathe, away from the artificial perfection of Silver Summit. And now, Karen Sterling wanted to erase it. Nathan didn't need to read the signature at the bottom of the letter. He already knew who was behind this. Karen Sterling, HOA President, ruler of Silver Summit. A woman with a plastic-perfect smile and a heart as cold as the marble floors in her mansion. She had made a career out of control. What color your front door could be, how many plants you could have, whether your mailbox was aesthetically pleasing enough. And now, she had decided that Nathan's wild garden was an eyesore, that it was wasted space, that it would be better used for a state-of-the-art infinity pool, one that would only be accessible to HOA elite members. Nathan felt his fingernails dig into the paper. She wasn't just taking land, she was taking history, his father's stories, his childhood memories, all for some overpriced playground for people who already had too much. Karen had drawn the first battle line. Nathan? He wasn't about to back down. She wasn't just taking my land, she was selling out the entire community, and she thought no one would find out. Nathan couldn't sleep. Karen's letter sat on his kitchen table, a reminder of the war she had just started. She wanted his land, his father's land, and for what, a pool? It didn't add up. Something about this felt off. So he did what any man with half a brain and nothing left to lose would do. He started digging. Athen had one advantage. He knew exactly where Karen liked to talk. The HOA clubhouse was her personal throne room, a sleek, overpriced building with floor-to-ceiling windows and terrible soundproofing. And every Thursday, Karen held exclusive planning meetings there. Nathan wasn't invited, but that didn't mean he couldn't listen. That night, he waited until the clubhouse lights dimmed, then slid up to the side of the building, pressing his phone against the glass. Recording started. Inside, Karen's voice rang out, sharp, confident, dripping with arrogance. The resort executives are expecting a finalized proposal next month. Nathan's blood ran cold. Silver Summit is already prime real estate, but with the new infinity pool, we can rebrand as a 5-star luxury retreat. A man's voice chimed in. A developer, and the water source, that's the key. Have you secured it yet? Karen chuckled. Almost. There's just one little inconvenience left. A pause. Nathan Blake. Nathan's grip tightened on his phone. His land sits on top of a natural underground spring, Karen continued. Do you have any idea what that's worth? Fresh, untouched groundwater? It's a gold mine. The developer laughed. And you can just take it? Karen's tone turned cold, calculated. The HOA gives me all the power I need. He won't have a choice. Nathan stiffened. She wasn't just stealing his land for a pool. She was stealing it for profit. No compensation, no offer, just pure greed. She thought he would roll over, that he would just let it happen. But Karen had made a mistake. She had underestimated him. Nathan had proof now, and he was about to use it. Some people saw luxury, others saw destruction, but I saw something Karen never expected, evidence that could ruin her. Nathan had proof of Karen's corruption, but exposing her, That was going to be harder than he thought. The next morning, whispers spread like wildfire. The HOA's golden members, the ones with multi-million-dollar homes, designer furniture, and luxury SUVs, were thrilled about the pool project. "It'll boost property values," they said. "It'll put Silver Summit on the map," they cheered. But others, they weren't so sure. A local journalist, Sophie Grayson, smelled a scandal. A biologist, Dr. Ellis Monroe, warned that digging into the land could disrupt a delicate ecosystem. And for the first time in years, the community was split. Karen had always been untouchable, but now people were asking questions. Nathan knew he needed more. And the answers? They were waiting for him at home. Nathan hadn't set foot in his family's old storage shed in years. It was a dust-covered time capsule filled with his father's tools, old notebooks, and faded photographs. But as he dug through boxes, his hands landed on something strange, a rolled-up map. The paper was yellowed with age, but when he unfurled it, his breath hitched. It was a historic land deed, marked with an official state seal, and in bold, printed letters, "Protected Natural Preserve." Restricted from commercial development, Nathan's heart pounded. This land, his land, wasn't just property, it was protected by law. Karen couldn't touch it. She had to know this, which meant she had been lying. Nathan raced back inside, digging through HOA meeting records, and then he found it. A meeting. Minutes document, stamped with an approval signature allowing the redevelopment, signed by his own father. Nathan's blood ran cold. His father had never agreed to this. Karen had done the unthinkable. She forged his dead father's name. Nathan's hands clenched into fists. This wasn't just about the land anymore. This was about his father's legacy. And he wasn't going to let Karen destroy it. She thought she could erase history in the dead of night. But I caught everything. Nathan had proof, a forged document, a protected land deed. Karen knew she was cornered, so she did what people like her always do. She got desperate. That night, Nathan sat in his dimly lit living room, reviewing the evidence. The land deed, the forged signature. He knew he had to act fast before Karen could pull another stunt. Then his phone buzzed, a motion alert. Nathan's stomach twisted. He pulled up the security feed from his backyard, and what he saw, his blood ran cold. A construction crew, wearing dark work uniforms, their equipment hidden under floodlights, was already ripping through his land. Bulldozers, chainsaws, a mechanical claw tearing at the earth. They were destroying everything, his father's trees. The untouched wildflowers, the underground spring. Nathan jumped to his feet. "Oh no, you don't." Nathan rushed outside, his camera in hand, but he knew his phone wouldn't be enough. That's when he remembered his drone. It was still charging. In the garage, from a project he had been working on days earlier. He grabbed it, powered it up, and launched it into the night sky. The drone's camera feed flickered to life on his screen. It soared above the construction site, capturing everything. Live footage, illegal land destruction at Silver Summit. The workers were laughing, smoking cigarettes as they chopped down century-old trees. Water from the underground spring spilled onto the dirt, turning the ground into a muddy wasteland. Nathan's fingernails dug into his palm. This wasn't just about taking his land. Karen was butchering it, for profit, for greed, but now she was caught. Nathan didn't wait. With one click, he uploaded the footage. HOA president destroys. Protected land for a private pool. Caught on drone. Within minutes, residents started waking up. Phones buzzed. Messages flooded in. By the time Nathan stepped outside, people were already gathering in the streets. Angry, outraged. Karen stepped out of her mansion, wrapped in a silk robe, clearly unaware of what was happening, but when she saw the crowd forming, the HOA queen finally looked scared. And then, sirens. Red and blue lights flashed against the Silver Summit mansions. Local authorities had seen the video. Karen had thought she could get away with it, but now she was about to face the consequences. She thought I was just a nobody, but she had no idea who she was messing with. The emergency HOA meeting was packed, not just with residents, but with news cameras, government officials, and law enforcement. Karen sat at the head of the table, arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin, irritated line. She had spent years ruling over Silver Summit, and even now, with her crimes exposed, with half the town calling for her resignation, she still believed she could talk her way out of it. She leaned back in her chair, rolling her eyes as Nathan stood up, holding a stack of documents. "Oh, give me a break," she scoffed, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Are we really doing this, over a few trees and a puddle of water?" Nathan smirked. Karen had no idea what was coming next. Nathan placed a large, rolled-up document on the table. Slowly, he unfurled it. It was the historic land deed. The room fell silent as officials leaned in, their eyes scanning the paper. "This," Nathan said, his voice calm but firm, "is an official land designation from the State Preservation Office." He pointed to the bold red seal at the bottom. "This land isn't just privately owned," he continued. "It's a protected natural preserve, legally shielded from any commercial development." Karen let out a mocking laugh, shaking her head. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "You think a piece of old paper is going to stop progress?" the crowd murmured. Nathan tilted his head. Then slowly, he straightened his shoulders, and with a quiet smile, he dropped the bombshell. "You're right about one thing, Karen," he said, his voice steady. "A piece of paper might not stop you." Karen smirked. "But I can." Karen's face twisted in confusion. Nathan took a slow step forward, and then loud enough for the entire room to hear, he said, "My name is Nathan Blake, and I am the Deputy Secretary of the Department of the Interior." Silence. Karen's smug expression disappeared. Gasps rippled through the room. Nathan's voice was like steel. "For 20 years, I've worked in land conservation and federal property law. I've handled land fraud cases, environmental violations, and corrupt developments just like this one." He stepped closer to Karen, his gaze cold, unwavering. "You see, Karen," he continued, "you didn't just try to take my land. You broke federal law." Karen's hands gripped the armrests of her chair. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for support, but the same wealthy residents who once worshipped her. Now they were staring at her in horror. She had spent years pretending to be untouchable, and now she was sitting across from the one man who actually had the power to take everything from her. Her voice came out shaky. You're lying," she whispered. Nathan pulled out his badge. The official Department of the Interior insignia gleamed under the lights. Karen went pale. Nathan placed one last document on the table. "This," he said, "is an official federal injunction. In other words, the Silver Summit redevelopment project is dead." The room erupted. Reporters snapped photos. Karen gripped the edge of the table, her breathing uneven. For the first time in her life, she had no way out. She thought she could cover up her crimes, but when the government gets involved, there's nowhere to hide. Karen sat frozen in her chair. The room buzzed with whispers, but she barely heard them, because for the first time in her life, she wasn't in control. Nathan Blake, her biggest obstacle, the man she had mocked and underestimated, had just revealed himself as a high-ranking federal official. And now, he wasn't just stopping her pool project, he was about to destroy everything she built. Nathan leaned forward, tapping the folder in front of him. "This meeting isn't just about Silver Summit anymore," he said, his voice calm but dangerously sharp. Karen swallowed hard. Nathan held up another document. The Department of the Interior launched a full investigation after receiving multiple reports of HOA corruption in this community. A reporter in the audience perked up. "Are you saying this is a federal case?" Nathan didn't even blink. "Yes," he said, "and here's what we found." He clicked a remote, and a new screen appeared. Bank statements, wire transfers, internal emails. And then the bombshell, 5 million deposit from Everlux Resorts to Karen Sterling. The crowd erupted, Karen's face drained of color. Gasps filled the room. A voice rang out, "She was paid off?" Nathan nodded. Karen Sterling accepted a $5 million bribe from Everlux Resorts in exchange for illegally seizing protected land. The developer she had partnered with, they weren't just building a pool, they were trying to steal an entire natural water source. Karen shook her head violently. "That's a lie," she screeched. "This is a setup." But Nathan wasn't done. Nathan clicked again. A new video played. The drone footage from the night of the destruction. Karen's workers tearing up the land. Water gushing from the broken spring. Karen standing in the shadows, watching it happen. The evidence was undeniable. Karen had spent years silencing people with fines, threats, and lies, but now she was the one who had no defense. A lawyer from Everlux Resorts suddenly stood up. "On behalf of Everlux," he said stiffly, "we were unaware of any illegal activity regarding this development. We are immediately withdrawing from the project and will cooperate fully with authorities." Karen snapped her head toward him. "What?" she shrieked. "You can't do this. We had a deal." The lawyer didn't even look at her. "Everlux does not associate with criminals." The crowd gasped. Karen's own allies had just abandoned her. A board member stood up, voice firm. "We are calling for an immediate vote," she declared. The motion to permanently remove Karen Sterling as HOA president. Karen's breath hitched. One by one, hands went up, 9 to 0. Not one person stood by her. Karen gripped the table, her hands shaking. "You can't do this," she hissed. But the truth, she had already lost. And then, the final words that sealed her fate. A uniformed police officer stepped forward. "Karen Sterling, you're under arrest for fraud, bribery, and destruction of protected land." Handcuffs clicked into place. Karen's screams echoed through the meeting hall. But no one felt sorry for her. Nathan watched as she was escorted out, her perfect world collapsing around her. The Queen of Silver Summit had finally fallen, and this time there was no way back. "She tried to erase my land. Instead, she erased herself. The destruction Karen caused couldn't be undone overnight. The trees she had bulldozed were gone. The ground was still scarred from her greed. But what she never expected was that her downfall would lead to something greater. 1 week later, Nathan stood in the heart of his land, surrounded by state officials, environmentalists, and members of the community. A representative from the Department of the Interior stepped forward, holding a signed declaration. Official. Preservation Order. Nathan's land was now a federally protected natural reserve. Karen had wanted a luxury pool. Instead, the natural spring she tried to exploit was now a state-recognized ecological site. It would be preserved forever. Nathan smiled. For the first time in years, he felt at peace. His father's land, his family's legacy, it would never be taken from him again. And Karen, her punishment was just beginning. Karen sat in a cold, windowless office, her hands clenched into fists. Her lawyers had abandoned her. Her bank accounts were frozen. Her Silver Summit mansion seized. The community she once controlled. Now they wanted her gone. And they got their wish. When the judge handed down her sentence, the punishment was clear. A lifetime ban from Silver Summit. All assets liquidated to pay back damages, fraud charges pending, facing up to 10 years in prison. Karen's face twisted in rage. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was supposed to be untouchable, but now she was just another criminal, another scandal to be forgotten. And then, the final humiliation. Nathan stood with the rest of the Silver Summit residents, watching as Karen was escorted into a police vehicle. The same woman who once ruled this neighborhood was now being driven away under police escort, and the crowd, they cheered. Karen's face burned red. She gritted her teeth as the doors slammed shut behind her. This wasn't just her downfall. This was her erasure. Silver Summit would move on. Nathan's land would be protected forever. And Karen, she would be nothing more than a bad memory. She tried to turn my land into a profit scheme. Instead, it became a symbol of something greater. Nathan stood before the crowd, the cool mountain breeze rustling through the trees. But this time, the land wasn't scarred. It was alive. And so was its purpose. Hundreds of people gathered, from families to scientists to environmentalists. A wooden archway now marked the entrance to what was once just his backyard. Now, it was a protected nature preserve, a sanctuary for rare plant species, home to the newly restored underground spring, a place where people could connect with nature, not exploit it. Nathan stepped up to the podium, microphone in hand, his voice steady. "This land isn't just soil and water," he said. "It's a story of greed and destruction, but also of resilience." He paused, looking out at the faces before him. "A story that started with my father." Nathan turned toward a newly placed plaque, resting at the base of an ancient oak tree. It read, "The Blake Nature Reserve." In memory of William Blake, Nathan's throat tightened. "My father fought to protect this land," he continued. "And when he was gone, I thought I had to fight alone." His eyes swept across the crowd. "But I was wrong," he smiled. "Because when a community stands together, no one can take away what's rightfully ours." The crowd erupted in applause. Karen's name was nowhere to be seen. Her legacy was erased in its place. A legacy of preservation, education, and unity. With the help of environmental experts, Nathan had launched a plan for a new educational center dedicated to conservation and ecological studies. School groups, families, and tourists would come not for luxury pools or gated privilege, but to learn about nature, history, and the importance of protecting what matters. And for the first time in years, Silver Summit wasn't just an elite neighborhood, it was a community again. Neighbors once divided by wealth and HOA rules now stood side by side, planting trees, sharing stories, and celebrating what they had saved together. Nathan, now 52 years old, felt something he hadn't in a long time: peace. His father's land was safe, his home was his again, and Silver Summit, it was no longer Karen's kingdom. It was a place where everyone belonged.